Hi Lee. I'm just waiting for your microphone to connect. That's it.
Hi, Julian.
Hi Lee, how are you doing?
Yeah, good yourself.
I'm very well indeed, very well indeed. Thank you for just taking the time to help me with this on
Yeah,
this
no.
session. I just wanted to just do a recording for the group of design and refurb uh, course attendees that I've got
Mhm.
that I have with YPN magazine. I've recommended you and your company to the group if they're wanting to use architects. So I'm going to record this session
Okay.
and I will share it with the group. And really what I wanted to just to go through really was imagine if you're someone that's never worked with an architect before and you're going to be starting a project.
Yeah.
I just could really do with some advice for the group on, what an architect would need, how to approach an architect, what's the best way to work with an architect,
hmm
um, do's and don'ts, etc. Um, so just really, like I say, for somebody with maybe not the most experience in the world that might be taking on, let's say, a HMO conversion is just some tips really on how to help people and how they should play it. Before we start, do you want to just share with everybody who you are, what your company does?
Yeah. So Lee Marsh, the company is Fusion 13. So architectural and planning consultants, and that can consist of anything from small scale extensions all the way up to new build developments, but also looking at things like conversions and renovation projects for either private individuals, would-be developers, or large-scale developers, and holding the hand from start to finish, fundamentally. So yeah.
And where do you work? Do you work all around the UK?
Yeah, so we've currently got offices in Easingwold, just outside of York, and down in Norwich in Norfolk. But we've got projects as far as field as Bath at the moment is one of the projects, and so we can kind of pretty much operate all around the country. It just predominantly depends if we need to carry out site visits or not, because there obviously comes a point that it's just not viable for us to travel 4 or 5 hours to
Mm,
visit a site. So yeah.
cool, cool. Um, and So just to start with, really, if you are starting at, say, a conversion project, you're doing an HMO, for example. Now you said you do planning.
Yeah.
So the big thing for me is Article 4.
Mhm.
So can you give any advice on if you're looking to buy a property, convert it into an HMO, you're looking at possibly Article 4 locations. Can you give some advice on, what's the right
Yeah.
approach?
So if you're looking in Article 4 area, the first thing to do is to review the council's policies in terms of percentages that they'll allow within an area. Each council operates in different requirements, so it's worth checking to see what percentage they'll allow. Once you've done that, it's then checking the register, the HMO register, to actually see how many active HMOs are still active in that area, and then seeing if the numbers below that, because that improves your chance that council will allow your HMO because they haven't reached the maximum target. It's not easy, but it's worth doing that research just to see if you're gonna, because if the targets or percentages already exceeded, the chances of you obtaining planning are severely limited. So yeah.
So if I was looking to buy an HMO in an Article 4 area, I've seen something I like, and I've got no experience in going to councils, etc. Is this something that you could do?
Yeah, so we've had clients come to us and say, "What's the chances?" And we can do a very quick dig into the council's numbers just to see if we feel it could be viable. To at least give a steer of whether it's worth spending any more time or energy on looking at a potential deal. So yeah.
Cool. And so again, really talking about looking at this from a somebody with little experience's perspective. Um, if you found somewhere that you like, you've gone and said, yeah, there's potential there that we could get through planning. It is in Article 4, but the percentages look okay. What's the process? What should a client do if approaching an architect like yourself and they're looking to convert a project from, let's say, a house into a commercial HMO?
So I think the first thing is, and we had a client recently do this, I think it's understand what clientele are you approaching first. Who is the HMO going to be for? Is it, working students? Because straight away that'll affect what your brief's going to be. It's no good just saying, I want a HMO, because who's your clientele? Because each clientele, as you know, Julian, in your experience, will have different requirements and different expectations. So that's the first thing, to actually understand who you're approaching or who the HMO is going to be targeted at. Once you know that, then you can start to build up a bit of a profile of what that HMO is going to do and what you need to achieve. I.e., if you're going for more professionals, are they looking for more cohabitable living space, more of a social cohesion with potentially more en suites? Or are you going for the workers where it could be shared bathrooms, but people are in their individual bedrooms and less socializing? So it's actually, I think, understanding your clientele and who you're going to approach first is probably the first brief. Once you know that, then I think you can kind of start to hone down what you're looking to achieve. So, yeah.
Okay. So one of the things I recommend people do is when they go to a property, they take an estate agent's drawing with them,
Yeah.
stage plan, and they mark out things like where the soil pipe is, where existing radiators are, where the bathroom is, where the plumbing is for bathrooms, where the fuse board is, where the boiler is, where the electrical sockets are. One of the things I've come across, and this is no disrespect to you, Lee, because I'm sure you're okay, but things like if they say, I want to put in all en suites,
Mhm.
a proposed drawing can be really basic and can have en suites all over the place. And when they start going to builders go, this is going to be really tricky because the soil pipe's over there. We've got all these en suites. We're going to need, more pressure, more water pressure, things like that. I'm not quite sure how to ask the question or what the question might be, but how do you approach, all those complications? Can you give any advice on what somebody should do to kind of minimize time wasted on drawings that might cost you an absolute fortune because of structural things that could be done better, plumbing locations, en suites to be put in a better place?
Yeah, so like you say, I think the plumbing's always a key one, because it is a case of, getting the drainage out. So it's always a case of where is the existing bathrooms in the property, and then seeing if you can actually utilize that current layout. So things like back-to-back en suites, rather than one being at the front of the property, one being at the back. Could you move them to the center of the property so they both benefit from the same sort of vent pipes?
Mm,
But then is it a case of that every room needs an ensuite? Actually, is it far more cost viable just to provide a better quality one single bathroom to be shared amongst more rooms? Therefore, actually, you don't need en suites, and saving the costs, and actually probably getting a similar return from the rooms. Once again, it goes back to who's that clientele.
mm.
Are they
I think
expecting en
banks as
suites?
well. Banks as well. Some banks, if you're doing commercial, will say
Mhm.
it's got to be an all-en suite for us to give you a commercial. But this is what I'm coming up against is I might say, look, it can be a good idea to do to have a shared bathroom, and they're going, well, unfortunately, my lender. Have you come across this where the lender has said it has to be all en suites for commercial valuation?
None of our clients have ever said that. No. No, that's the first time that our clients have said that. But whether that's because they've come around that issue, I don't know. But nobody's ever said that to us.
Interesting. Okay, so I would say to anyone listening, there may be some commercial valuations that ask for all en suites, and I would maybe look at whether they really do need all en suites or whether there's a way around. And like you say, I'm not an advocate of all en suite shower bathrooms in an HMO purely because of trying to keep the infrastructure as simple as possible. Personally now I think that people will take a good value room,
Yeah.
and it might be a little bit better to do non-suite. So can you give any advice for anyone that may not have approached an architect before on, some of the things that information that you could do with before instruction? Any kind of advice you can give to somebody that may be using an architect?
Yeah, so I think I agree with the comments regarding having the estate agent's plans and noting key information, but it's also I'd recommend taking room measurements. The estate agent's floor plans are purely indicative. They're not there to do anything other than tell you number of bedrooms and stuff like that. So it's worth just doing some very quick measurement checks just to see what actual size the property is. Also just comparing that against the EPC, but not relying on the EPC. The EPC is purely just somebody's assessment at the time. So do your own checks on the floor measurements, because at the end of the day, obviously meeting the HMO standards is crucial. You know, you can't go, well, it's plus or minus a square meter. You either comply or you don't. It's not a grey area. And then I think it's kind of coming up with a clear brief and direction. And then you can present that to an architect, knowing who your clientele is, what floor space works for you financially. And that's always a key with our clients is, before you kind of progress with the architect and everything, hopefully run some numbers to see what the valuation would be. You need to know what those numbers are and share that with the architect. You know, if your numbers only stack up as, say, for example, a 6-bed HMO, but you've worked out the floor area and you're only ever going to get 5, your architect's not going to perform miracles and suddenly find 6 or 7. So kind of understand how your numbers work. But it's also have a look along the rest of the street to see what other people have done, especially in terms of HMOs. What have other people done, good, bad, and indifferent? But also looking at things like loft conversions. If you are looking at a loft conversion, look at the next door neighbours. Have they done it? If so, you know that it could be viable. If nobody along that street's done it, it could raise the question of why hasn't anybody else done it? Does it just not work? And therefore saving you a lot of energy and time. You've worked on your calculations going, well, we'll convert the loft into 3 extra rooms. If nobody else along that street's done it, then it's possibly not viable. So it's just looking at, you know, other people have been there, done it. Therefore, you're not trying to recreate the wheel, you know. Follow examples of other people that hopefully done it successfully, but also learn from ones that aren't so successful.
So now moving on to maybe developing. Not something I tend to get involved in, but if you've got a client moving up or wants to start looking at developing, you know, new build, self-build, etc., can you give any advice on that? It's such a general topic, but I tell you why I'm asking is because I've seen so many people get into real problems when they start doing developing. So any advice?
Yeah, so once again, planning's crucial. So it's a case of actually, if you find a site, is it liable to get planning? So you can do your own research, you know, is it within the development boundary, which all councils will have maps that show where the development boundary is. If it's inside the development boundary, that'll increase your chances of getting planning. If it's outside, they will be more restrictive. So straight away, you can quickly identify sites that might be viable or not. And that's something we can also do with our clients. So if you find a site, we can review planning policies to see if we think it is viable. But the same with HMOs, it's a case of, if you're going to approach an architect, give them an idea of what numbers stack up. You know, there's no good coming to an architect going, I've got a field, what can I do with it? Because the architect could turn around and go, 1 house. Well, if you know in the back of your mind you need 10 to make it financially stack up, let the architect know. The architect's not there to guess. He can work with you, and it might be a minimum of 10 to stack up, and then the architect knows what they're working with, because very quickly they'll come back and go, doesn't matter how I draw it, I can only ever get 8. At least it gives you something to then potentially negotiate with. Or the architect could come back and go, I can get 15, you know, and everybody's excited then. But knowing what that number is that needs to work for it to financially break even is important. Otherwise, the architect's just going off blindly.
So just moving deeper into that, then you've got people like project managers, QSs, you've got building contractors to work with. So let's say, for example, you've got a client who's come to you with a set of instructions. You've got a property, you've designed, proposed an HMO. We'll keep it an HMOs because we're looking at something fairly simple rather than developments. But you've done a set of drawings. Can you possibly give me a kind of an idea of the process once you've done a set of proposed drawings on where to go next for somebody that may be trying to start a project and they've never done it before? So it's a fairly complex HMO, commercial HMO project, let's say a 7-bed conversion. There is all en suites. You've done a set of proposed drawings. What would be some advice for where to go to next in terms of getting it done properly?
So I think it depends on kind of experience and who you potentially got in your team. So if you've got a developer that you know and trust and have seen their examples of other HMO conversions, not every builder can do HMOs. So it's not just the case of, well, he's built an extension for my neighbor. Yeah, surely he can do it. You need to find somebody that's got experience with HMOs just because of all the additional regulations that come with it. If you haven't got a builder or contractor that's come recommended and experienced, but you're looking for a little bit more cost certainty or comfort, so when you're tendering the project, I would definitely recommend employing a QS just to give you figures that you can work with. Because at the end of the day, if you're inexperienced and a developer comes along and says, well, it's £500,000, what have you got that to base against? Does somebody picking a number potentially out of the air? But at least if you've got a QS who's working for you, and that's the important thing, is they're working on your behalf, you can actually see how that developers come up with their costs. You know, if your QS is saying, well, the build should be 300,000 and your builder's saying 500,000, at least you can start to have that discussion of where the discrepancies are, knowing that you've got the knowledge and experience of the QS to kind of go, that's just not stacking. Or there's something the contractor's missed or your QS has missed, so at least you can understand the figures that a little bit better.
So
Because once the project started, costs will quickly run away with themselves.
So, you know that I'm fairly design focused.
Yeah.
My experience when dealing with QSs has been that they really look at the basic product.
Yeah.
So if you're looking to design something a little bit better than just the basic product, if you're working with a QS, I mean, I'm going to try and answer this question as well, giving them a bit more detail at the earliest stage so they know what your expectations are would probably be a good idea. Have you got any experience on projects that maybe are not just the basic, where
Yeah, I think it's always key. The more information that you can share with your team or even aspirations, the more informed they'll be. Because it's no good with the architect, the builder, the QS, the interior designer of just going, I want a HMO. Everybody's experience or knowledge of a HMO is completely different, and they're not the end client. It's your, at the end of the day, you've got to look at it, your property, your direction. Therefore, you've got to bring the rest of the team on board. So what I tend to say to a lot of clients is, if you're not clear on what you want, share images. You know, go on Instagram, Pinterest, to find something you know what you'd like to achieve, and then at least everybody can start to see the vision and direction of. You don't want everything magnolia and white plastic. Actually, it's slightly better quality. This is the look, and then people can start to get a feel and give a bit more accurate pricing.
Cool. So just, I guess I want to keep this short and sweet. Okay. So what is the value of using an architect?
So it depends on how much you're going to involve them in, because obviously there's different scopes. But it's one of those things that if you bring them on nice and early, they can potentially maximize the benefit of the property that much more, i.e., getting an additional room out of the space, designing it so it's more functional, or even just the layout so that you're not spending a fortune, like we said, on drainage layouts. So it can increase the value, but bringing it even before then, it's identifying whether you can get planning or not, because you can spend, you know, we've worked with clients who have spent weeks and weeks and weeks running through numbers and figures, and it all stacks up beautifully and they're going to make a fortune. If you can't get planning, it's not worth it. So, you know, get your team involved nice and early, and then they can avoid any pitfalls, especially planning, but also just with your builder. It helps then just to make sure the builder knows what they're priced for. So, yeah.
Cool. And just to finish then, can you just share with everyone how they can reach you if they want to get in contact?
Yep. So phone calls are always the best way. Love chatting to people, just even if it's a bit of advice and direction. So mobile or telephone, but the website has got some of our case studies on. So always welcome to go and have a look on there.
And what's the website address?
So it's www.fusion-13.co.uk.
Absolutely. And they can reach you through the website. There's a contact form.
Yep, there's an inquiry form. So yeah, drop us a line and always try and get back to you and have a chat about your project and see how we can help.
Fabulous. And is there anything that I've missed that you'd like to add?
Obviously, absolutely employ your services, Julian. But no, it is one of those keys that the team, you need to build a team that can work together. Personalities are very important, especially as you are the client. You need to make sure that all your consultants work together, but also work with you together, because it can be incredibly stressful. So all the consultants need to get on board and be open to conversations, and sometimes criticism. Criticism is a bad thing, but as long as everybody's talking, it will make sure the project goes in the right direction.
Okay, lovely. Well, listen, I won't take any more of your precious, valuable time, Lee. But thank you so much for joining me and for answering these questions. And
Yeah,
hopefully it'll be beneficial.
yeah,
And I will catch up with you soon.
yeah, that's wonderful. Thank you very much.